Nevin Seip on the hi-hat at the end. It's a big deal for a lead trumpet player. Okay, next we're going to have a program change, just a slight one. You'll see Little Darlin is next in your program. That's not true. We're going to do Cashmere Cutie, the third tune, next, and then we'll do Little Darlin. Cashmere Cutie is a song composed by the late great Billy Strayhorn. Billy Strayhorn was known for his work with the Duke Ellington Orchestra. He was really considered at the time to be sort of Duke Ellington's right-hand man, his composing and arranging partner. And what we've come to realize much, much later is that Strayhorn was, an elite composer and arranger in his own right. He wasn't like some underling or understudy to Ellington or anything like that. But we did help him. Duke Ellington would be composing and arranging a tune. He'd get stuck on like the 37th measure, and he'd just hand it off to Billy and say, "Hey, can you work that out for me?" And Strayhorn knew Duke Ellington's style so well and his arranging so well that he could certainly do that. But he did have his own unique style. He was a Francophile, meaning that he loved everything Parisian and he loved everything French. For leisure, like you might lay on the couch and read some fiction novel, he used to take Igor Stravinsky musical scores, 16 instruments, and sit back on the couch and read those scores for leisure without recordings or anything like that. He could realize all the sounds of all the instruments and all the chords in his head just through reading it without any reference with an orchestra, without a piano, anything like that. And so he was really a great student of the classics. He was born in 1915, very impoverished. In fact, he was so sickly as a child that his parents didn't even give him a name until he was 5 years old because they expected him to die. So he was just, his birth certificate said baby boy Strayhorn until he was 5 when they named him William. And then he was always known as Billy. But his mother, who was his biggest fan, always called him Bill. She was the only one that called him Bill. So anyway, he becomes this elite composer and arranger, such a sweet, vibrant personality, very warm. He wanted to be a concert pianist with the symphony orchestra when he was growing up, but in the 1930s, that was not a job available to African American men, or African Americans, period. So he was really prevented from doing that, but then he got into jazz, of course, which, jazz appreciation students, you'll know that while jazz comes as sort of what you might call a gumbo made from 20 different types of music, all sort of blended together. The main innovators and most of the major performers in jazz were Black Americans. Okay? So to appreciate jazz is really appreciate the contributions of Black Americans to our musical landscape. And so we have that with Billy Strayhorn and Duke Ellington. Of course, they were very good friends with Martin Luther King. They were always talking about social aspects with Dr. King at parties. They were in Harlem, in Sugar Hill, which is a gorgeous neighborhood at the time. So I really can't say enough about Billy Strayhorn's work. Now, he and Layne Horn, who was a wonderful singer, sort of the epitome of beauty at the time and also an actress, she and Billy Strayhorn were sort of best friends, and he wrote this tune called Cashmere, Cutie, and sort of with her in mind. This song is kind of an attempt to do what Maurice Ravel did with a piece he wrote called Bolero, where he made an experiment to see if he could make a constant crescendo from the first measure of the piece to the last measure of the piece. So gradually getting louder and louder and louder and more active all the way through the piece. And this is something similar. So I hope you'll enjoy Cashmere, Cutie. Start out featuring Jackson Mills on the piano. which is a staple of the big band repertoire. Big bands are what you see in front of you. About a 16 to 18 piece group. It's what American music has instead of the European Symphony Orchestra. It's our version of the American, or of the European Symphony Orchestra. When jazz started, we say in and around New Orleans. It's in the U.S. South, around the Gulf and Bay area. But really sort of gets going in and around New Orleans. And we say about the year 1900. We get combos. Essentially anywhere between 5 pieces and 8-piece groups. And really for about 20 years, the style codifies in collective improvisation, where you've got essentially marching instruments, drums played in a marching style with a lilt. But you get 3 instruments of the front line, which, anybody know those? Jazz freeze, give me one. Trumpet, clarinet, yeah.
I guess it's a sax.
No, not yet. Saxophone doesn't come into jazz until later. But clarinet does the heavy lifting to the reeds there. So you get the trumpet playing the melody, you get the clarinet that does all this florid, fast counterpoint in the upper register. And then you get the trombone that plays sort of the lower harmonies and the slower moving counterpoint. And in that style, those 3 instruments are all improvising at the same time. Okay, and we call that collective improvisation. And after Louis Armstrong comes to us in the 1920s and records his Hot 5s and Hot 7s albums in Chicago, it becomes clear that the future of jazz is going to be based on the soloist, the single soloist improvising rather than sort of the cacophonous sound of those 3 instruments in the front line improvising at the same time. So out of that, jazz becomes popular. Jazz replaces ragtime as the most popular music in America. And what ragtime did for jazz was that it created an audience with a thirst and a zest for dance music. So ragtime is this piano music that does get orchestrated eventually, but it's this hot dance music that everybody's dancing to. All the young kids, but even the older generations are dancing to it. And so this thirst for this sort of music is created, and then jazz sort of takes ragtime's place as the next new version of hot dance music. Okay, so we eventually, now this is before we have sort of standard live sound and amplification. Okay, so we don't have the ability to have a microphone on every sax with and live sound like we do today. So what they need to do to accommodate all these dancers in live dance halls is they need to start making louder sounds with more volume. Well, how do you do that? You add members to the group. So instead of 7-piece groups, they became 9-piece groups. And then 9-piece groups became 11-piece groups. We added more trumpets. We added more saxes. 11-piece groups became 13, became 15. So really in the mid to late 20s in New York, this is where what you see in front of you, the big band, starts to become codified into a standard instrumentation. So that's really when we get these 15 to 16-piece bands. And in the 1930s, all the way through the end of World War II, big band jazz music was the most popular music in America. Imagine that. What's popular, what's most popular today? We have a lot of different genres and subgenres, so we have a bunch of popular stuff, but some stuff we just call pop music, right? But hip-hop is incredibly popular. Country music is still popular. And sort of the crossovers in that thing. But back then, in the 1930s, what you're listening to, like our first song that we played, Anything Goes, that would have been an example of what was the popular music of the day. And it was dance music. And you had these huge dance halls, especially in major cities. But think of the Savoy Dance Hall in New York. I mean, they had to replace that wooden floor every 3 years. And thousands of dancers. And imagine how loud thousands of dancers on a wood floor. Very loud. They're athletic too, very athletic. So we have big band producing a bunch of sound, and the big band becomes the standard instrumentation for really the next 20 years, okay, in jazz. Then jazz moves off in a different direction in sort of during the war era, the World War II era and after. It goes back to smaller combos, 5, 6, 7 pieces, and now, of course, we have a wide variety of what is going on in jazz now. But you're looking at our large version of an orchestra at 16 to 18 pieces. And a lot of lot of these bands had singers, a male singer, a female singer, but also usually groups of singers, like trio, like the Andrews Sisters, or quartets that would come out and sing too. All that is to say, this piece, Little Darlin, by Neal Hefti, was composed for the Count Basie Orchestra. Count Basie Orchestra, probably one of the, if I had to distill it down to two orchestras, big bands in jazz that are probably the most important, I would say, the Duke Ellington Orchestra and the Count Basie Orchestra. Okay. Count Basie Orchestra really comes to us from Kansas City, even though Count Basie was from New Jersey, New York area, really close to where Sinatra was from. But he ends up in Kansas City playing with Walter Page's Blue Devils, and then forms his own band out of it, and we get the Count Basie Orchestra. Count Basie Orchestra, you might know, be familiar with hearing from being one of the backing bands for Frank Sinatra for many years, especially when he had his show at the Sands Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas, one of the great big band albums ever, Sinatra Live at the Sands, 1965. That's the Count Basie band. And Neal Hefti was a trumpet player and composer. You probably know him from this famous theme. Na, 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 na. What's that? Batman. It's Batman. He wrote the theme song to the TV show Batman. And he also wrote the theme music to both the TV show and the movie for The Odd Couple, and a whole bunch of film scoring stuff too. But this is a beautiful, beautiful ballad where I love to program this tune because it's musically challenging. The notes and rhythms are not hard for college level musicians to play. The range is narrow, the music is not fast, it's not technical, but musically it's incredibly challenging because they have to see how soft and in tune and together they can play while we're playing this ballad. This is going to feature Jonathan Gonzalez on trombone. It's a piece called Little Darlin. Okay, next, a song by one of our great saxophonists in the history of jazz, and born in 1930, and we've been really fortunate to hear the music of Sonny Rollins for nearly 100 years. He's 94 years old, and still alive and well. He did just recently retire from playing the saxophone, but I'm talking about like 91, 92 years old. Of course, this is one of the great blessings of music. You can do it your entire life as opposed to, say, playing football. So we still have him around, and it's really been a blessing. This song is called Tenor Menace. It's a blues, and the blues is an American form of music. Again, comes to us from the U.S. South, and was one of the two main influences on the beginnings of jazz in 1890. Right around 1890, two styles of music come to New Orleans, and of course, New Orleans is an important location because we don't have, automobiles and interstate highways and everything like that. New Orleans is at the mouth of the Mississippi River, which is the gateway to the American interior. All the farmers from Indiana, Ohio, Minnesota, Missouri area, they grow their goods and they send them down the river if they want to sell them overseas. So everything comes down to New Orleans. So New Orleans becomes an incredibly important location, and there are jobs there, good jobs. And it was a cosmopolitan city, so even in the sort of the post-Reconstruction 1890s in New Orleans, a very racist time in American history, New Orleans is sort of a beacon of hope in the South because you have a whole bunch of different types of people from all kinds of backgrounds, and it's really a very small area. It's geographically isolated by rivers and ponds and lakes and swamps and crocodiles. And so people really depend on each other down there, and they have to work together even if they can't speak the same language of each other. And we get these people, we get all these different types of music in New Orleans coming together in one small location, and everybody's hearing everything. Okay? And out of this, again, the blues comes to New Orleans in 1890s, and then these musicians that would become the first generation of jazz musicians get a hold of the blues, and they eventually codified it into a 12-measure style with a generally static set of chord changes that you would hear if you were, say, listening to a blues great such as B.B. King. If you listen to B.B. King play the guitar, he would have been playing mostly the 12-bar blues. Okay, so that's what we have here. And one of the important things in jazz, again, is improvisation. And it's also one of the very scariest things to do if you're a musician starting to learn the jazz style, because you're used to reading music, planned notes, planned rhythms, planned pitches. Well, when you're improvising, you don't have any of that. It's a blank slate. And while it's, wonderfully creative thing to do, it's also a little scary because, you're like, what do I do? Right? So it's been, a pedagogical goal of mine to have all the students in the jazz ensemble improvise every semester and on every concert. And with this 12-bar blues, we achieved that. We worked on the 12-bar blues in every single musical key, all 12 different sounding keys throughout the beginning of the semester. And now we've got one, and this happens to be in the key of B flat, but you're going to hear everybody improvise on this one. So this is Tenor Menace, and you might be able to count along with the form. When you're hearing people improvise, they're going to take 12-measure long solos. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 4, 4. Okay, 12 measures long, and after that 12 measures, it's going to repeat, and then the next soloist is going to take over. Okay, so this will feature Jaylen Jones, and then the rest of the band too. On Tenor Menace, 24 bars at the front, 24 bars at the front. Well, now it starts over. Measure 1, 2, music that I think is a great model for democracy in America, because jazz values the individual voice. You're not supposed to sound the same as the person next to you. You're supposed to sound different, right? And jazz values that difference of voices. Jazz values your experience. If you have a raspy voice like Louis Armstrong has, if you have a pure, clean voice like Ella Fitzgerald has, jazz values that. But it demands cooperation. You have to work with the other musicians that are playing. So it invites you to participate always in your own voice, but you have to be collaborative, right? And this is jazz. So next, we're going to hear a more modern piece that was written for big band, again by Billy Strayhorn, who is, I would say probably the father of modern jazz arranging. All the jazz arrangers since him have really looked toward his work to figure out what they were doing. And Billy Strayhorn died at a very young age. He was born in 1915, died in 1967 of cancer. And his last several years of life were incredibly difficult. He wrote this tune when he was at the Upper Manhattan Medical Group, which were his sets of doctors and Duke Ellington's doctors when he was getting treated for cancer. And you can hear a lot of the, I think you can hear a lot of the emotions in this song. I think you can hear the IV drip in the trombones. And I think you can hear hope in a portion of the melody. And then you can hear defiance in some of the melody. And you'll see when the song ends, I'm not going to tell you what I think it is, but you get to decide what his feelings are about his future throughout and by the end of the tune. You see if he still has hope at the end or not. This is going to feature Christian Gonzalez on the alto saxophone and Billy Strayhorn's Blood. Okay, I'd love to thank you again for coming out this afternoon. It's been a pleasure working up this music and having such an attentive audience. I appreciate it very much. We've got one tune left, and this is going to be different than everything else you've heard. This is not going to be in the swing style. This is representing the influence of Cuban, Afro-Cuban, and sort of what we would generically call Latin jazz today that really took off in the late 40s, early 50s. Dizzy Gillespie formed a big band that played bebop music, but also a band that played Afro-Cuban music. He had a percussionist who played congas that became sort of pretty famous and was well-known, named Chano Pozo at the time. And in New York City, the Latin communities in New York City really came together with the people who were making jazz. And out of this, we get this really vibrant form of music with really a lot of different sort of subgenres and beats and everything like that. But this is a piece by a trumpet player and composer and arranger who teaches at Queens College in New York and also at Juilliard, named Michael Philip Mossman, a fabulous trumpet player, played with Art Blakey, the Jazz Messengers, and just a long line of jazz luminaries, and of course he is one himself. He's probably about 65 years old, still playing, teaching, and really a master of Latin jazz. And this is a piece called Cubauza, and we were fortunate enough to have to import some of our percussion students to help us out on this one. Let's see, what do we have back there, Jerrod? Let's tell the audience what we're playing.
We got claves.
Now, the clave is the heartbeat of Latin music. And there are a lot of different clave beats, but he's going to be playing one of those, maybe.
We got bongos.
Bongos. Hit the bongos for us, please. Okay. Conjures. Give us a little sample. Give me a little groove. Okay, yeah, there we go. And Layne. Timbales. And cowbell. Okay, now hit the skate part. Okay, so you're going to be listening for all those, along with the drum set, which is a collection of many different instruments all in one. By the way, any music you listen to that has drum set in it owes a debt of gratitude to jazz, because the drum set was evolved through jazz music, sort of between the 20s and the 40s, and now it's very common. And so you go see whatever, Metallica, Fish, or whatever, you see all these drums, Neal Peart, right? and in all sorts of music, we see the drum set as really a foundation now in American music. And that only comes to us through jazz. Okay, this is a wild one, so hang on to your hats. We never know what's really going to happen. Meet you at the end of the tune. time. Students all will be up here, and enjoy the rest of your day. And check out the back of your program. We have a list of upcoming events in the music department. All of those are free and open to the public, with one exception. The Holiday Extravaganza is our, I think, 16th annual, and it's a wonderful, wonderful holiday concert. Great to bring your family to, a very festive time. And that is a fundraiser for Student Music Scholarship. So there is a fee with that one, but get your tickets for that, and I hope to see you there. That's at the Gibbons Performing Arts Center. All right. Thank you, everybody. Take care.